The Pac-12's 2025 media deal is done, and it's a great sign for 2026.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest and craziest sport on planet Earth. Florida State whiffed on a recruit. How? No one really knows how. Brian Smith might have an explanation, though. And Miami has added not one, but two transfer receivers and a guys in the portal at wideout that you will want on your team. That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So, no dragging into the summer this time, anyway. We could do it again next year. It was so much fun a couple years ago and went great for the conference. Why not run it back? But no, the Pac-12 gets a media rights deal done in April for 2025. Now, you can make the argument this is an easier one to negotiate. It's certainly a less lucrative one. And the priority here, clearly based on all the reporting and the result, was exposure to the college football world rather than dollars. I think that's the right approach. As you go about rebuilding the Pac-12, you have to prioritize football. And a big part of college football, more than college basketball or any other sport, is perception. And you can't build perception and brand if people aren't able to watch your games. Oregon State is getting home games this year on ESPN against Cal out of the ACC and Houston out of the Big 12. Massive. That's massive for the Beavers fan base. That's massive for the Oregon State football program. Now, going out and winning those games with new transfer Malik Murphy at quarterback, who they invested a lot of NIL dollars for, as they should have. I think he's good. That's the next step. But right now, live in the present, live in the moment. This is an absolute win. So the media rights partners are ESPN, the CW, again, and CBS. Now, frankly, I'm not wild about the CW. The exposure is undeniable. That's the upside of it. I hope their production quality increases over time. I don't think it's a great look when people tune in to the CW, and as I did many times over the course of last season, and the broadcast camera quality just isn't very good. And it feels like you've been teleported back to 2007, which was a simpler time. It was a better time to some. I mean, the iPhone hadn't been released yet, so we weren't all stuck doing that. I was 10, and the Pac-10 was still a thing. So for some people, maybe that's a good thing. But I think those things can improve. As someone who's a part of broadcasts all the time, your 50th is a heck of a lot better than your first. There are a lot of kinks, a lot of logistics to work out that can improve. So hopefully that's a part of it. And I know that there's, the HD channel, the regular channel. I'm just saying, as someone who was all over the place, wanted to go and watch the games, it never looked as good as the other ones. That needs to be rectified, whatever that problem was. But having ESPN involved is a big indicator. Do you remember? Let's full Joker style here. Let's wind the clocks back a couple of years at this point. The offer to save the Pac-12 from ESPN that the then leadership, pioneered by George Kliavkoff and Pac-12 presidents at the time, RIP, was $30 million a year from ESPN. ESPN is now back in the fold. That they want to take on Oregon State and Washington State games. CBS is going to cover the big Washington State games, and the CW will do the rest. But the fact that they were interested enough to bid on the rights to get these games before the conference is even a full conference, when it's just two teams, great sign. That is a great sign. Going into 2026, I'd look at ESPN as being the biggest name that I'd pursue if I were the Pac-12, unless the Mountain West contract doesn't get renewed, because the best teams in the Mountain West have now, of course, gone over to be a part of the Pac-12. If you can get Fox and CBS, great. But if you can have a full mixing and matching of Fox, CBS, and ESPN rather than Fox, CBS, and the CW, I think you're in an advantageous position there. Because the other thing that Fox, CBS, and ESPN have a lot easier than the CW is the streaming component. I would take a guess, this is just me guessing, but in an educated manner, perhaps it's too based on my own experience. It's a lot easier to find games that are streamed, not, on a television right in front of you on ESPN or CBS, Paramount Plus, ESPN Plus, or Fox and the Fox Sports app. I think that's going to get you in front of more people than being on the CW there. So does that turn into a long-term partnership? Maybe if the money's right, the exposure's there, if they can up the broadcast quality, then okay, I get it. But bringing ESPN back into the fold and having CBS also poke around, they're going to broadcast the Apple Cup, which is still going to be a really fun football game, as it was last year. And I'm glad they're continuing the rivalry, even as they've split conferences. CBS being involved makes me think, okay, the Mountain West deal with Fox and CBS expires going into 2026. That's where the Pac-12 is going to be looking first and foremost. But if you then have a third option of ESPN, of one of the heavy hitters, that's phenomenal, because the priority has consistently been, or the messaging has consistently been, that exposure is the priority over dollars. I think that's the right approach, because if you go into these deals with what the value of these conferences actually are, the money is so far away from where everybody else is, you're not making a huge dent. If a deal that's primarily with the CW and Apple, this is just purely hypothetical. If you were to get a deal with, Apple, for instance, and they were to say, we'll give you $15 million a year, but a deal that is with Fox, CBS, and ESPN, or some combination of those linear providers, gets you $10 to $12 million a year, it is so not worth taking that risk with the new conference for a few $1,000,000. It's not making it. I know it's a lot of money, but compared to where you're at, you're going to be at a financial disadvantage one way or the other. Schools and other conferences, get tens of millions of dollars for making the playoff, and the Pac-12 was able to negotiate it up to 3.6 as a part of the playoff distribution, which is better than what it was going to be. That was a couple $1 million more. That was one of the really good things Commissioner Teresa Gold has done. You can't get into the money game, because you have to be able to brand your new conference. You have to be able to showcase what the product is to get people excited about it, to get people talking about it, to get people watching it, discussing, having a positive impression. And then when push comes to shove and it's, hey, the Pac-12 champ's 11-2, the American Conference champ is 11-2, it's not automatically, we're going with Tulane or Memphis or UTSA over a Boise State, Oregon State, or whomever is the Pac-12 champion in this hypothetical. Like that is your ultimate concern. It's got to be football driven. It's got to be exposure driven, because the best part of all of this disaster for the Pac-12 and Oregon State and Washington State in particular is that your access to the college football playoff is greater than it was before. That's an unquestioned positive. I don't know that there's a benefit from all of this realignment mess that is better than that. And so you have to keep that in mind consistently. And I think they've done that. I think they're doing the right things. But getting ESPN into the fold here and at least giving them a taste of what they once had, and understanding that the West Coast footprint is still one that's going to be dominated by the Pac-12 football-wise in that late window. Yeah, there are downsides to it, but there's a major upside. You can provide what nobody else can. The ACC cannot give you an 8 o'clock Mountain Time kickoff. You know why? It's 10 o'clock Eastern. No one's kicking at that time, as crazy as the sport is. So I think this is really good news for the Pac-12. I think if you're a Pac-12 fan, you should feel really good about all of this. The kickoff times have been released, I believe, so people can make their fall plans now, months and months in advance, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm taking a couple trips in the next few weeks. I'm a big planner. I'm a big advanced planner. So lots of good news on that front. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. Let's get back to the actual football here. Well, sort of. This is the recruiting version. Mike Norvell is not getting it done at Florida State. First, this episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. All-in-one convenience is what they're all about. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Check them out at monarchmoney.com. Florida State whiffed. There is no other way to see it. Brian Smith from The Portal and Locked On Seminoles is here to discuss just that. Brian, I'll give you the floor because you know this one better than I do. Florida State just whiffed on the recruiting trail in 2026, right?
That's the nice way to say it, Spencer. When you have a recruit that's from the same high school as Charlie Ward, and that's 30 or so minutes from Tallahassee, and he commits to Cal, that's a problem. That's a problem, Spencer. That's real. You didn't even get an OV, Spencer.
Didn't even get an OV. Do they not think he's a good enough recruit, player, or what?
No. This is a kid I knew about. Like when I walked onto the field, I know the coach there. I know their media director. This is an elite program in Georgia. They just won 6A 2 years ago. Everybody recruits that school. Everybody. Got an Ohio State visit lined up and a Clemson visit lined up and a Florida State visit lined up. And he committed to Cal.
Okay. We might have slightly buried the lead there. Like, yes, this is a Florida State whiff when you have a guy of this caliber. And just so people are aware, Brian, what's his recruiting ranking? What position does he play? Like, who exactly are we talking about here?
Cameron Brooks, defensive lineman, 6'3", 245, natural pass rusher, guy that was coveted as a sophomore, had major offers before he could drive a car. And again, he's from 30 minutes away from your school. He could drive blind and hit his head on a goalpost in Doak Campbell Stadium. And they're losing him to Cal, the same team that's been made fun of in the portal because they lose 4, 5 transfer portal running backs. Being like, Cal? And you're Florida State, Cal?
Yeah. This is one of the top 20 edges in the country. And
yeah.
Look, I'm as intrigued as anything that he went to Cal. Like, I've discussed that program extensively in the offseason because it's interesting. You know who the GM at Cal is now, right?
No idea.
Ron Rivera is the general manager, Cal grad. He is the general manager for football for the Bears. And I have to imagine his paw prints are all, or bear prints perhaps. No, bears have paws, don't they? Yeah?
That is technically true.
Okay, that's you get what I'm going for. I imagine his paw prints are all over this recruitment because I don't know how else you pull a kid out of Florida State's backyard to go across the country. Now, of course, Florida State and Cal are conference rivals, as we know. Classic ACC matchup that it is from Tallahassee to Berkeley. That's just a trip really across the pond. A quick drive in the backyard of, like 25 hours or whatever it would be. But I think that factor has to be discussed because Cal has been in disarray. They did add a couple of portal linebackers. They were projected to get Shamar Brown, the running back from North Dakota State. They picked up a guy from UTSA. Like they felt like they stabilized a bit, but I didn't think they had suddenly stabilized the departures within their program and the roster turnover to the point where they're going and pulling a kid out of the state of Florida. Like, is this just maybe early in the process and maybe Cam is thinking, sure, I'll commit to Cal and see if anybody else gets more interested?
I don't think so. From knowing him, he's a pretty basic kid, kind of all shucks. Thomasville is 12 miles into the state of Georgia from Florida, and Tallahassee's right on the border. I mean, that is the local program that you have to recruit. It's just, you can't miss there. Like, I can't give all the info, but like the people around Thomas County Central High School were shocked at how much more effort Cal put into it than Florida State. That's probably the biggest problem.
That's just weird, right? Like that, like
100%.
we're discussing it on the show for a reason. This is not normal. There's nothing about this that feels normal. Him going to Cal, Florida State, not being in the folder, not even, as you said, getting, they didn't even get an official visit. He's got one scheduled for June 6th.
I know, but that doesn't mean he'll take it now because he committed to Cal. I'm guessing they threw some money at him, which a bunch of schools will throw money at him. But if you're Cal, you probably want him to shut it down. I could be wrong on that. I haven't asked Cam yet. I'll go see him later this spring, but it's weird. This is like one of the weirder recruitments in my lifetime, and that's saying something. I've covered recruiting a long time. Cal? For a South Georgia kid who lives 30 or so minutes from Florida, I've never heard of anything like this, especially in April. Spencer, you don't fool me very often with recruiting here, but this one has got me befuddled.
Yeah, and I want to talk big picture here for Florida State, who are coming off, literally, I am not being hyperbolic here. They are the worst preseason top 10 team in the history of college football. That was statistically borne out a year ago with how their season went. By the way, Brian, who was their one ACC victory against?
How about them Bears?
How about them California Golden Bears? If ever there was a representation, a microcosm of the Justin Wilcox era, beat Auburn on the road and lose to Florida State, who's 2-10, whose only other win came against Charleston Southern. That is Cal at its peak. But does that make it more confusing, less confusing? Does that stuff even come into recruits' minds when they're thinking about where they want to go play football? Like, oh, Florida State sucked, but they beat Cal last year. Like, does that matter at all?
I mean, it can, but like neither one of them was any good, so he couldn't have been looking at the recent past. I mean, I don't know. I was told that he wanted to see Florida State's new staff this spring, and he visited how things went and all that. But this was a loss prior to the new staff getting there. To be clear, pot roast, as we call him, Terrence Knighton, the new D-line coach, can recruit. He's a good coach. He's developed well, but he's only had a few months to recruit the kid. It's not enough time, so it's not on him. This is on Norvell from getting the wrong guys to recruit him, not putting enough effort in before he switched over his staff, and he was forced to do it. Let's not kid ourselves. He was told to either do this or hit the road. So this is a Norvell problem, again, with recruiting. This is a problem over and over. Here's a key thing. A dead rat could recruit a top 10 class to Florida State. You know how many top 10 classes Mike Norvell's had at Florida State, Spencer?
I believe the answer is 0 if you're not factoring in the portal.
That is 100% correct. You know why, Spencer? Lazy. He's not a bad guy to be around. Everybody I've ever spoken to said he's a fun guy. So if you're a fun guy, you're at Florida State, and you're still not getting top 10 classes, do you think maximum effort is being put in, Spencer?
Well, no, is the answer. And the follow-up is he just too reliant on the portal? You know, the portal for the top-tier programs is absolutely a tool that should be used. It is not the box that holds all your tools in it. It's an extra wrench, screwdriver, or a specialty item that you need for weird, odd jobs. But it's not the bulk. It's not the foundation of what you keep out in the garage for when you have a project to fix. It isn't. Ohio State last year, the big story around their roster, Brian, and you know this, was they invested their NIL dollars into keeping kids from going to the NFL or going to the portal, and then they did go out and add a few high-end selections. But it's not a coincidence. The last two national champs coming from the Big Ten have invested very much in the guys that they recruited, and then they go pull a guy here and pull a guy, just a Caleb Downs, a Will Howard, a Quinshon Judkins. That was really it from the portal for Ohio State. And the programs, you can have some success leaning heavily into the portal. No one has shown me that with a roster that is, over 50% portal guys from that cycle, that you can go and compete for a national championship.
Yeah, you're not going to do that. Like Ole Miss is trying to trend, as an example, into being much more high school reliant, but they still got a ways to go. They're a team that's on the cusp, but until you recruit, especially linemen, you're not going to get there. Oh, by the way, Cameron Brooks is a defensive lineman, a position that Florida State needs to hit in this class. By the way, he's 30 minutes from Tallahassee. So it's just the same things over and over again. You're not going to get lucky with Jared Verse out of Albany every other year. Like, that's one of the biggest fly-by-night. Got to give him credit. They recruited him and got him to come there. And
talk about a whiff by the national recruiting infrastructure. Holy smokes.
Nobody wanted him out of high school. He's from Dayton, too, a hotbed. Nobody wanted him. So that's just a way.
And Ohio State just said, no thanks?
Nobody offered him. Nobody did.
And now he's one of the best young pass rushers in the NFL. It just goes to show you.
It is, sometimes there's just, everybody was wrong, and it is what it is. But nobody's wrong about Cam Brooks. Like, he had offers when he's 15 years old. Florida State's been recruiting him longer and still failed. It's hard to fail that bad. I mean, it really is.
Well, we'll see if they're able to flip it around, because I'm with you. The fact that he didn't even, I still can't go over the fact that he went to Cal. Like, Georgia didn't want him? Georgia offered him, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the other schools. Like, you know what I mean? Like, his list of offers is pretty extensive.
Yeah. We'll call it the Ron Rivera effect. Why don't we call it that? And we'll just leave it there. The Ron Rivera effect. I blew Brian's mind with that tidbit. You see how much sicko information I retain in my head, Brian? It's unhealthy, but I could not love it anymore. Brian Smith from The Portal Podcast, your daily recruiting and NIL podcast, and Locked On Seminoles as well. Speaking of the transfer portal, Miami is bolstering that receiving core with a new pass catcher for Carson Beck. Can they be what they were last year? Miami's got a new wide receiver. They did not get Trevor Pena. He went to Penn State for probably a pretty penny. You know what? I like Trevor Pena. I think he was the top receiver in the transfer portal at the time of his commitment to Penn State. And Miami was poking around for a reason. They clearly feel, having lost a couple of weapons from last year, notably Xavier Restrepo and second-round pick Elijah Arroyo at tight end as well, that they need to reload a little bit in the transfer portal. They've done just that. So they go out and they make another addition. And is it Trevor Pena? No. But what do you have? Well, here's Alex Dono of Locked On Canes to explain what Miami just got.
The Miami Hurricanes on Tuesday just added slot receiver Tony Johnson. He's a transfer from Cincinnati. He actually becomes the second receiver to join Miami in the spring transfer portal window. Keelan Marion from BYU, a receiver and big-time kick returner, joined the Hurricanes last weekend. And Tony Johnson comes at an area where Miami has some guys. Like, you talk about slot receiver. That's where Tony Johnson played. 70% of his reps last year with the Cincinnati Bearcats was in the slot. You know, Miami has Ray Joseph, who's been playing behind Xavier Restrepo for the past couple of years, so his experience is limited, and exciting true freshman Malachi Toney. But I think in this case, Miami is thinking surround Carson Beck with as many experienced weapons as possible. Johnson has gotten extensive playing time over the past 3 seasons, started his career at FAU, Florida Atlantic in Boca Raton, played 2 years before transferring to Cincinnati. With the Bearcats last season, 48 catches for 449 yards. He led his team with 6 touchdowns last year. So a sure-handed, proven guy with a year of eligibility left. And my big thinking there is to have as much experience in the receiver room. Miami also back in the January transfer window brought in C.J. Daniels, a 6-year senior receiver from LSU. Miami's other receivers, the ones who returned from last season, are all young. So to have as much experience as possible when the Hurricanes open up their season against Notre Dame. And that defensive secondary that held Penn State, they held their wide receivers to 0 catches in a college football playoff game. Miami is trying to load up with experience in their receivers room, and that's what Tony Johnson brings. He really wanted to come back to the Sunshine State. He's from Ocala, Florida, played his first couple of years at FAU, and the schools that Tony Johnson was deciding between were University of Miami, where he ultimately lands, and Miami beats out Florida State, and they beat out UCF for Tony Johnson. So again, this is a player who scored 6 touchdowns last year, primarily playing slot receiver, someone Miami feels can raise the floor and the ceiling of their offense. So Tony Johnson is the newest Miami Hurricane and another weapon for Carson Beck to throw around too.
Yeah, anytime you can add somebody that's a known commodity for a veteran quarterback, I'm certainly here for it. You can also come at it from the angle of, hey, he's a veteran quarterback. Shouldn't he be able to elevate young receivers? Sure. Did you feel like Carson Beck did that at Georgia? I certainly didn't. By the way, started his career at FAU. The other Florida schools, if you want to refer to them as that, are just the coaching rehab spots. FAU, one-time head coaching stop of Lane Kiffin. FIU, one-time head coaching stop of Mario Cristobal. Now, of course, the Miami Hurricanes head coach. But Carson Beck last year did not have a great receiving core. Drops were a huge problem. Now, I don't care who you are at quarterback, you can't overcome that stuff. If you're throwing the ball on the money and the receiver is dropping it, guess what? You've done your job. He's got to be able to do his. So the question that raises in my mind when Miami goes out and makes these moves, and the Marion edition is a good one. Talked about him leaving BYU last week on the show. That was a bit of a surprise for the Cougars. I don't know that their passing game can be as good as it was last year. I do think there has to be at least a little component of what Dono mentioned of we need to make sure we have guys and a team that's sufficiently ready to compete with Notre Dame. You never want to come out week one in one of the biggest games in college football at home and just look flat and discombobulated. So I think bringing in a couple of veteran pieces that are capable playmakers makes a heck of a lot of sense. I still have Miami pegged as a regression candidate. There are several in college football of the high-profile variety, whether that's Colorado or Miami. I think those are regression candidates. I think Oregon and Ohio State don't regress to fall out of the playoff picture, but are not going to be at the same level where Oregon won the Big Ten, Ohio State won the national championship. I don't think either team plays at that level this season. They're resetting at quarterback and a bunch of other positions as well. I think Miami is in that sort of spot. Still, though, in the ACC, even though their schedule stinks. Miami's schedule easily the worst one amongst the big players in the ACC. They have 2 byes in a 3-week span. I don't know what happened there. They play, I think it's 7 straight conference games, and the last 2 are on the road to end the year. It's a nightmare sort of schedule. And Carson Beck is not Cam Ward, or else he would have gone out and stayed in the NFL draft. He could become a first-round pick again. Whether he would be right now, I think it's kind of up in the air. Depends on who you ask. Apparently evaluating quarterbacks is really tough these days, and not everybody has the same opinion. But Beck has Shannon Dawson. Now Beck has some weapons around him. There will be questions on defense. There's been a defensive staff change for Miami, and understandably so. I think Miami is a good team. Their win total on FanDuel is 8.5 for a reason, though. Last year was 9.5. Why? Because they had a team that, frankly, should have won 10 or 11 games, even though they were escaping all the time, on the back of Cam Ward's magic quite often. Carson Beck isn't going to do that for you. You need to have a more complete and holistic and balanced team around him. I don't know if Miami has that yet. I think they have taken steps in the spring transfer portal window to move in that direction. So those 2 wide receivers go to Miami. Here's another receiver. Not sure where he's winding up. I'm pretty bullish on this guy. If you were looking for a number 2 receiver, don't know that he can be a number 1 because he's only got about 426 yards in his career. He has not been used a whole heck of a lot. But Tobias Merriweather entered the portal from Cal. Who hasn't transferred away from Cal? I'm pretty sure you and I have done it at this point. Merriweather was a 2022 recruit, class of 22, committed to Notre Dame, transferred to Cal, has been there for, I believe, the last couple of seasons. This is a guy who has really high untapped potential. Really high. He should be. He is, in my view, one of the top wide receivers available in the transfer portal. Because what he brings to the table is not just some experience at the powerful level. He doesn't have the production necessarily. But he's not new to college football. You don't have to teach him how to be a student athlete, because guys still do that sort of stuff. You don't have to teach him how to get in the weight room, how to work at practice, how to get better, how to go against college competition, or how to make plays in games. He's done that as well. He just wasn't used a ton last year because of the nature of Cal's offense. He certainly could have been. Merriweather is 6'5", 205 pounds. And I think he's a guy that, for a Power 4 school, is a high-end number 3 receiver, a solid number 2, a low-end number 1. I am that high on him. I know he doesn't have the career stats to blow you away. I get it. I fully get it. But although the portal is closed for guys to enter, they're still getting into the portal, though. I'm not entirely clear how that works. There's a delay in announcing it maybe, or paperwork or what have you. But players impact guys are still going to come out of the transfer portal in the coming days. And that is why I keep this show 5 days a week all year round. There are always people to talk about. We just have to see where they wind up. But keep your eye on Tobias Merriweather, the last guy that I highlighted, who was a 6'5 receiver, by the way, on this show as, hey, I think he's got real power forward potential. Sincere Brown wound up at Colorado. And later this week, we'll definitely talk about what the Buffs did at wide receiver. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.